So let's kind of get going. So I'm going to start a little bit with my profile. By the way, if you want to join LinkedIn with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm GradCon like everywhere. So nobody else is named GradCon for potentially obvious reasons. And so you can connect with me on Facebook, Pinterest, Snapchat, you name it, man. I'm GradCon everywhere. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me anywhere else. Are you familiar with the World Economic Forum? This is a picture of Davos, Switzerland. There's a discussion they have there. World leaders get together, and they talk about what's going on in the world and in society. And in this particular sort of World Economic Forum, which was back in the spring, they talked about something called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And how many people have heard of this expression, the Fourth Industrial Revolution? Okay, so this is a little bit fresh. Okay, so the Fourth Industrial Revolution, basically it says, right now, we're in the midst of an industrial revolution. And sometimes when you're in the middle of something, it's a little harder to see it versus when it's over, you can kind of look back. And so I'll kind of just quickly review industrial revolutions. I'm sure you're all super connected to industrial revolution history, but let me kind of go through it really fast. So the first industrial revolution was, steam power came along, and really mechanization started. And there was a time, back then, people would argue about whether horses were better than machines, and people would prefer their horse, all that kind of stuff. But that was a very important time because it began to amplify the efforts of humans significantly beyond just people power. The second industrial revolution was electricity, the advent of the production line, assembly. And this is a great picture. This is New York City. That's the Flatiron Building. And you can see that's the Flatiron Building in 1900. And that's the Flatiron Building right at the end of World War I. And you can see mostly horses and some carriages and all cars, right? And I assume they're all taxis. But they're not. They didn't have yellow paint back then. If you ever want a really cool book, read Alfred Sloan's History of General Motors. It's called My Years at General Motors. And he actually talks about the evolution of the car. There's an entire chapter on inventing paint. Like colored paint was like a huge revolution in car manufacturing, but they're all black back then. And then the third industrial revolution, which we've kind of all participated in, has been the computer revolution. Silicon chip, integrated circuits, and sort of we've enjoyed that. That's my first machine in the middle, and my current machine on the right. And I briefly touched the machine on the left when I was in university. And how many people here programmed on cards? Yeah, all right, old school. I've still got mine framed. All right, so then what's the fourth industrial revolution? So the fourth industrial revolution is really characterized by three things. There's this physical revolution, particularly 3D printing and robotics. It's really changing the way we make things. The fascinating announcement not long ago, Foxconn's laid off thousands and thousands of workers from their factories because they've been outsourced to robots. Right? So it's a kind of an interesting evolution as we're seeing manufacturing go. And it's a big change. Biological, my brother's actually an organic chemist, and he's in this industry. Our understanding the genetic code and what we can do in genetics is expanding medicine, expanding our ability to alter the human form and alter what we plant and the way we grow things. If you look at yields on a farm, a yield on a typical farm in the 1930s would be about 3 bushels per acre. And the yield today is around 65 to 80 bushels per acre. And they're now getting it up to 120 to 140 bushels per acre, same field, right? And so these kinds of advances make a big difference in terms of how we feed ourselves and feed the world. And then digital, right? Especially Internet of Things, you've all heard of that. We're going to be embedding devices in all parts of our body, all parts of the floor, all parts of the walls. I'm going to show you something in a little bit that'll be interesting. Blockchain, which is the underlying technology under Bitcoin, allows secure transactions to occur over distributed networks. Blockchain potentially is the most important thing that's happened in technology in the last sort of maybe 20 years. It's a generational shift in the way we'll transact. So if you don't know what blockchain is, get into it. It's like a very, very, very big deal. And all this stuff's powered by the cloud. There's all sorts of cloud suppliers out there now, and we've got this ability now to have access to essentially almost unlimited computing power. And if you look at a map of what's happening, if you look at what all the telcos are doing and what all the companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google are doing, we're effectively turning the globe into one giant connected computer, and with the attendant kind of capacity of that. The Azure cloud that Microsoft runs today consumes as much electricity, like our data centers, and I can't tell you how many we have, but our data center structure consumes as much electricity as the entire state of Virginia. Our big sort of restriction right now on data centers is that when we build a data center, we expand it until literally we can no longer get any more power in that region, and then we move to somewhere else. Very cool. And we're actually looking at alternate power generation techniques because we're kind of running out of dams and stuff to be able to use. Anyway, and so kind of core to all this is these components of digital transformation. And there's these 4 pillars. You'll see this in lots of different places, but how in digital transformation are we engaging our customers differently? Someone mentioned there in user experience, like how is that changing? How are we empowering our employees to operate in new and different ways? How are we optimizing our operations so that we can do things in new ways that save money and allow us to produce more? And how do we transform the products themselves? And that, for me, is part of the most interesting part of this, is that a lot of what we sell and a lot of what we do is actually changing. The products are transforming as well. So this is a very exciting time. Now, as I go through this, and this is kind of a summary of what I've just talked about for the last sort of 5 minutes or so, it's really a very product-led and sort of engineering-led perspective, right? So you've got the first industrial revolution. What's one kind of thing, was there anything someone noticed? Like, what do you notice about this chart? There's another piece of information on this chart you might notice. See who's paying attention, who's the bright one in the room. Getting shorter, right. They're speeding up. Why are they speeding up? Because our techniques for communication are improving. And basically the way humans work is we iterate on the work of others. It's a good thing. That's what makes humans so cool and very social, also potentially not at our best quality in certain other ways. And so this ability for us to see what's happening around us and be able to react to it is speeding up as communication speeds up. And that's just, if someone invents something new tomorrow in Amsterdam, we will hear about it that day or the next day. It used to take years for this information to travel. Anyway, so that's a summary, but it's like this engineering sort of product-led vision. And what I've been thinking, I've been talking about this a lot with my team, and my team's like, cool, digging it, right, into it, but it's like, how does that apply to us as marketers and sellers? And I actually, as a marketer, I consider myself a seller. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I know we sort of differentiate them a little bit, but marketing is selling at scale, and increasingly selling needs to use marketing to be scaled. Like, things are burning together a little bit, but we'll come to that in a minute. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to try to take this model and then say, what have the marketing and selling revolutions been that are associated with these industrial revolutions? So that's what I'm going to try to do right now. Okay? See how it goes. Okay, so I thought first I would think about tactics. How have tactics changed over time? And so if you think about that first industrial revolution, the tactic was a human-to-human connection. Right? People were selling stuff off wagons. It was very much a personal connection. The second industrial revolution was associated with mass direct. People like John Caples, Claude Hopkins, Albert Lasker, folks like that kind of came into their fore, and it was like the beginning of mass marketing. Then, in the third wave, the computer revolution is also associated with television and broadcast and all the things that we became known as mass persuasion, right? Vance Packard's book, if you've ever read that. And where are we today? Where we are today is we have the ability, because of the revolutions that are happening in technology, to actually be very personal, again, but at mass. So I think that's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. Now let's keep going, though. What is personal selling and what is marketing and selling? So I talked about that a moment ago. So marketing is selling, okay? And I wanted to just give you a couple of thoughts in terms of how marketing and selling are associated, and I'm going to tie this back to social selling in a minute. Because advertising really is the selling conversation. A very famous copywriter named John E. Kennedy. John E. Kennedy was, he actually worked for Albert Lasker with Claude Hopkins. They were contemporaries at Lord and Thomas in the 1930s. These guys invented orange juice. Like, if you ever think, where did orange juice come from? An advertising agency invented it in Chicago in 1934. They took the idea of, everyone's super excited suddenly all around us. And then they invented like the feminine hygiene category. There's a great book called The Man Who Sold America. It's Albert Lasker's story. If you get a chance to read it, you got to pick it up and read it. It's an incredible story of advertising and selling. Anyway, so John E. Kennedy said that advertising is salesmanship in print. Now, the word salesmanship is a little outdated now, but it's a really great way of expressing the idea that you're taking what used to be a door-to-door sales motion and turning it into something at scale. So I always love that. And I think that, sort of the 20th century communication model is starting to become quite outdated. The TV was amazing in that you could create a brand impression across millions of people at once, super quick, right? And for a while, you could reach 80, 90% of Americans in one weekend. Everyone watched TV, and they all watched 3 or 4 shows. And it was a great time. That's like almost gone now, but still get the Super Bowl, and that's kind of about it. What happened, though, and this is like a bad thing for marketing, is we got lazy as marketers because we stopped waiting to hear a response, because we were sending out a message. We had a megaphone. Buy my brand. The analogy that I like to use, it's a little bit like a comedian, right? So if a comedian was a marketer, the way a comedian would do their act is they would stand in front of an audience and they would say, I am funny. Because the only thing a comedian wants you to think is that they're funny. That is their sole communication objective, right? So I would stand up here and I'd say, I'm funny, I'm funny, I'm funny. And I think, okay, I think they need a little bit more frequency. I'm funny, and I'll try some different channels. Maybe I'll distribute pamphlets. I'm funny, okay? I mean, that's how we tend to market, right? That's not what a comedian normally does, though. Because the 21st century model, and we can actually do this now at scale, is a stimulus response model. Right? So if you think about what a comedian actually does, same communication objectives, the comedian says, here's a joke, put a joke out. You come to a conclusion in your own mind. You say, wow, that's funny, I laughed, so I had a reaction. He's really funny. That's what the comedian wants you to think. But you come to that conclusion on your own. It's a much more powerful conclusion. And when you walk out of there, you talk to a friend, they say, hey, how was the show? She was really funny. She really made me laugh. I loved it. Okay? If the person had told you to say that, you would never have said it. And that really is the core of social selling and modern personal communications, which is a stimulus response model that gets people to come to their own conclusion much more powerfully than by you telling them what to think. And so how do you create the artifacts that allow them to come to those conclusions is really challenging and really interesting. All right, so coming back to our marketing revolution. So that was tactics. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about brand. What was the brand in each one of these revolutions? And the brands have changed. I think I might be stretching on this slide a little bit, so I'm open to feedback, but the brand in a sales, one-to-one sales, is really the person. You buying from the person because you like them. And many of those products weren't even really branded. The product became really important. I worked at Procter & Gamble for about 10 years before I went to Microsoft, and the product became very important for a while. Ivory, 99, 44th, 100% pure. It was all about what the product benefits were. Then the company and the brand became more important in a broadcast age, and today it's solutions. Customers want to know, how are you going to solve my problem? It's a very different time, and if you try to sell a product to customers today, if you notice, they're like, you kind of not really wanting product pitch right now. I really have this challenge. I'm trying to digitally transform my company. I'm trying to change the way that I interact with my customers. I'm trying to empower my employees in new and different ways. If you actually ask CEOs, what's your number one concern? Your number one concern, 84% of CEOs say that digital transformation in their company is their number one concern. Their next thing is like half of that, and it's like, people and HR issues. It's actually quite an amazing time to live in. All right. I think I worked okay, actually. I kind of like that slide. I think I like that one. Okay, so then the media is shoes. Hopefully, if you're a successful salesperson, you'll be wearing shoes. And then print, TV, and then online. Again, I think this is relatively obvious, but it's sort of, we're stating that as each one of these changes, our ability to interact with customers in deeper ways changes. So, shoe interaction is not bad because it is person to person, but not very scaled. Print interaction is 2D. TV interaction is kind of like a 3D because you've got more depth in the number of images. And then online, of course, you can have a lot of depth and you can do a lot of stuff with content marketing. So where we're going to complete immersive, we're going to be completely immersed in computing all the time. Every surface is going to be a computing surface. Our chairs, our floor, everything will be a computing surface. And we've got the HoloLens. You may have seen that. That's sort of a VR headset that you wear. Very cool. It creates kind of three-dimensional images. That's going to be, we'll be living in basically half virtual, half physical space in 50 years. It's going to be very interesting. So very cool time to be in marketing and selling. So the last slide in this sort of series is who are the sellers, right? So in the first revolution, we got traveling salespeople. You've got copywriters being the core of what was going on in the middle. Mad Men, of course, in the 1960s, and then social selling today. I think social selling is like not just what we use to try to do a great job in B2B selling. I think social selling is the way everything's going to work in marketing. The social selling for me is obviously fantastic in B2B, and we're using it as a great tactic today. But there's a reason why we bought LinkedIn. And it's not just because of what LinkedIn's doing today. It's what role does LinkedIn play in the future of marketing and selling in the world. And we are living in the most exciting time to be in marketing and selling. Now, my dad thought he lived in a pretty exciting time. He actually worked at Young & Rubicam right there on Madison Avenue through the 60s and 70s, considers Mad Men a documentary. At what point I got a little nervous. Certain shows, I'm like, Dad, really? But there is actually one, at the beginning of one of the seasons, I think it was season 5, there's a scene where they're dropping water balloons out of the offices of an ad agency. You know that scene? My dad was one of those people in that room dropping the water balloons. Wow. And they were from his office, which looked over Madison Avenue. So that's why he's like, this is just all real. Anyway, so that was a pretty fun time to be in advertising, but this is the time when it's really going to change, because it's going to stop being obviously marketing and selling, and it's going to start to be stimulus, response, and conversations. And really, we go from being seen as maybe, and this is maybe sounds a tiny bit negative. I don't mean this that way, but I've heard other people say this. We go from being hucksters and sellers to people are solving problems, right? It's a lot more fun to be someone solving someone's problem than someone who's trying to sell someone something. Even the connotation of being sold is not a positive connotation. He was selling me. She sold this to me. It doesn't feel great. Where they solved my problem, fixed my challenge, is helping my company transform. Those are exciting things to be part of. So that's where my headspace is and where we're going. And so that's how I coach my team. So let me just sort of wrap up with 2 quick things. One thing I'll say is that I just want to share a little kind of, when you're doing a talk, like there's always stuff going on at the stage which is different from what's going on when you're in the audience, right? And so one thing I just find absolutely hilarious is the confidence monitor here isn't showing my screen. I'm just working off my own computer. And so they've just got a blank screen here with literally a giant, probably 9-inch, no, I'm going to say it's 11-inch Apple logo. Literally moving around the screen like it gets a screensaver. There's this giant apple. They're just moving all over the place. Oh, no, it's gone now. How about that? It's like, wow, that's distracting. Anyway, just wanted to share that with all of you. So yesterday was the 54th anniversary of what? Yesterday was the 54th anniversary of what? No. Not NASA. Yesterday, 54th anniversary of John Kennedy's speech on reaching the moon in 10 years. That was 54 years ago yesterday. And, and I think one of the things that I love that period of time, because it was a period of time when everything seemed possible and there was so much innovation going on, and it was a very exciting time to be alive and people like being part of that. For me, I think now is going to be another one of those times. We don't have the reach the moon in 10 years goal or speech yet. I think there's been attempts to kind of land things about curing cancer in 10 years and stuff like that. People are trying to set bold objectives, but the kind of technology innovations that we're seeing are absolutely revolutionary, and they have huge implications for us as marketers and sellers and other disciplines that we're in. And so I just want to kind of leave you on a note of, in a season of maybe more negativity than I would desire, leave you on a note of positivity about where we're going as an industry and why it's so exciting to be here at the LinkedIn conference today. Hey, listen, thanks everybody. That was an awesome session. Great audience. Thank you very much.